Welcome to the Every Brain is Different podcast. It is Samantha and Lauren here with you, and I hope everyone is having a fantastic summer. Lauren, remember when I told you how I wrote on Threads and asked, how do you know your child is autistic without telling me they're autistic?
Yes.
So I got my favorite response to that, and it was so funny. So this woman said that her son was obsessed with dinosaurs. He walked down the aisle. He walked her down the aisle, to like sit down, and then he takes his spot at the front of his wedding to the Jurassic Park theme song. And I was like, yes, that makes me so happy. And if my son gets married, I imagine that's what he would want to do. And that makes me really happy.
Love that.
It just made me happy because I could picture my son doing that. And yeah. And then my mom like freaking out because that's not appropriate.
I imagine my boyfriend doing that with Star Wars.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like,
I went to a wedding where they did that. They asked people to dress up in Star Wars. They said black tie or Star Wars costumes. And I was like, that is a funny mix, but it's cool.
I'm here for it.
Well, I'm here for it. So yeah, and then they walked down the aisle, like everyone walked down the aisle to Star Wars themed music. So, and
love that.
they got married on May 4th.
As they should have.
But they had they had this wedding. They like went to the courthouse and got married on May 4th because it was like a Tuesday or something. Yeah. And then they had this ceremony and everything like a month later or something like that. So
love it.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. I like it. I like theme weddings. I did not do that, but I like them. Mine was like fairy tale. I'm not even joking. I had like the big poofy princess dress and it was amazing. It was everything I ever wanted. So, yeah.
Well, that's good.
Yeah. But anyway, that is not why we're here today. I just really, really like that response.
I love it.
So, today we are going to talk about one of the top 3 things that I recommend you do after your child is diagnosed with autism. And I say this because when my son got diagnosed, they didn't give us any resources. I think I've mentioned this on here before, that they didn't give us any resources. The doctor just said, oh, he's fine. And I'm like, he's not talking. He's like I want to say occupational therapy skills, but his sensory system was way out of balance and so many other things. And I'm not coming at this from like a deficit point of view, which we'll talk about that. I'm just saying he needed help because he couldn't function in his everyday life.
Yeah.
It was
not fine.
Yeah, and that's not fine. And so I wanted to find ways to better support him in his life so he wasn't constantly having meltdowns and not enjoying his life. So, and also when he got diagnosed, I think other parents feel this too, that you feel a range of emotions. So I felt relief, and like a lot of other people, I felt grief. And we had, what's her name? She's a grief expert. Anyway,
yes. I don't remember.
We'll link her episode in the show notes. But parents do feel it's a sort of grief because it's okay that your child has autism, and it's okay to maybe mourn the life that you thought that they'd have or you would have. And it's okay to mourn that. Yeah. Sometimes, a lot of the time, you can feel both. You can feel happiness, you can feel relief, you can feel grief, you can feel whatever you feel. Every emotional response is valid. It does not matter what you feel, it's valid. And then, okay, you can feel like you need to fix them for maybe a minute, but then you better get over that real fast. That's all I'm saying. Because the goal isn't to fix your child, it's to support them so they can live their life. It's not to fix them. They don't need fixing. And then getting a diagnosis, a lot of people always ask me, like, why would I get my child a diagnosis if they don't need any resources? I'm like, well, they do need resources. Yeah. A diagnosis changes your understanding of your child so that you can understand your child a little bit better. It's not who your child is. Like, your child is not autism if they're diagnosed with autism. That's part of who they are. But it helps you understand that part of who they are a lot better than if they
Yeah.
weren't diagnosed.
It's
And
a
then,
tool.
yeah, it's just a tool. It's a tool to understanding your kid. And then just remember that you don't have to figure everything out in a week. That's why we are doing this in different weeks so that if your kid just got diagnosed with autism, you don't run out and try to do all these
All
things
the
at once.
things.
Yeah, we want you just to do one thing. So, if I could sit down with all the new parents that get their kid diagnosed, this is the first thing I would tell them. I would say, learn about your child, not just autism. You can definitely learn about autism, but the saying goes, and it's true, when you see one person with autism, you've seen one person with autism.
Yeah.
And like we
It-
said, like a minute ago, autism is part of your child, it's not your whole child. So not every child is going to have the same presentation of autism. Like, I have 3 kids with autism. They are all very
Very
different in how
different.
it shows up. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're all like genetically related. And so some people are like, well, they should be the same. They are definitely not the same.
Yeah.
And then there's different things that can pop up, like your child might struggle more with sensory processing or communication or executive functioning or emotional regulation. They may have different strengths, they may have different interests, but all these things are part of autism. Your child may have strengths in one area and then maybe they struggle a little bit in a different area. And then you see another child with autism and they have strengths in the area that your child is struggling in, and so you just gotta learn about your kid. And then
Observe.
yeah, yeah. Observe your child rather than trying to compare them to online checklists. I think that online checklists are good as a gauge, like, okay, my child is 3 years old. What are children typically doing at 3 years old? And then you kinda know what to work on. Because, for example, if you're trying to get your child to do cross-body movements, so you're just trying to have them, like, like, do this elbow down to the knee or something like that, to the opposite knee. If they're 2 years old and you're trying to get them to do that, that's not developmentally appropriate. Like, no two-year-old is gonna be able to do that unless
Yeah.
they're really advanced. I don't know why that example popped up in my brain, but that's what
It's
popped
like
up in my
that's
brain.
really random.
It's crossing the midline. It's because I do that with a lot of kids and their parents. I had a 3-year-old and their parents were like, "I want them to cross midline because that's really important." And then I was talking to an occupational therapist and she was like, "3-year-olds aren't supposed to be able to do that. So tell them it's not a problem. Like, you don't have to really work on it. It's not something that they're behind in right now." So
Yeah.
that's why that popped into my brain, because I work a lot on crossing the midline. But I think the online checklists are good to gauge maybe, like, where your child might need to work on some things, but it's definitely, like, not like, "My child isn't doing this, they're a failure, they're falling behind, they need to be doing this right now."
Yeah.
No, not at all. And then within that, we need to think about neurodiversity affirming thinking rather than deficit based thinking. So, for decades, autism has been almost exclusively talked about through a medical lens. And this is where parents were handed a list of deficits or delays or things that their child couldn't do. And while it's important to understand the challenges your child faces so they can access appropriate supports, focusing only on what they struggle with can unintentionally shape the way you see your child. If you're constantly focusing on the deficits, then you're not gonna be able to see their strengths and what makes them them.
Which is all of those other things,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
that
And
they can do.
I know it's so hard to have a neurodiversity affirming approach, which doesn't ignore challenges. We're not ignoring the challenges that your child has. Instead, it recognizes that autism is a natural variation in how the brain develops and processes the world. So the goal shifts from changing your child to fit the world toward helping your child thrive while building skills that improve their quality of life. And I know it's super hard to have a neurodiversity affirming approach when you have to fill out assessments. And those
Yeah.
assessments are
Focus on what they can't do.
yes, they're so demoralizing because I know when I fill them out, they don't give you a gauge of where your child should be. It's just like it will ask,
Do they struggle in this area?
yeah, it's just like,
Do
can
they
your child tie
struggle?
their shoes? And I remember filling that out when my child was 3, and I just thought, well, should my
Did
child be
they?
able to tie their shoes? Do other 3-year-olds know how to tie their shoes? Is that typical? And the thing that I struggle with on those assessments is they don't give you where your child should be. They just ask blanket questions. And then when they go score it, if your child misses so many in a row, then they just go to the next category. And so your child might be 3 years old and you're like, and they might be behind what a typical 3-year-old is, but you're answering no, 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 because they're asking you what like a 10-year-old might be doing.
Yeah.
And so it's hard enough knowing that your child's behind, but then when you're doing those questionnaires and they ask all those questions, it just makes you feel even worse.
It's like more detailed that they're
Yeah.
behind. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. And so I know that that's a struggle that a lot of parents talk about. And all I can say is just keep answering those honestly because that's what gets your child's resources. And a lot of parents, like when they fill out the Vineland, for example, they will say the Vineland is supposed to be filled out if your child was completely alone, could they do the tasks that they're being asked to do? And parents will fill it out and they'll say, well, I only have to help them twice. That's not what it's asking. And so you'll skew the results and get less resources if you make it seem like they can do more than they actually can do. But I know when you're filling out those forms, you just want to be like, yes, my child can do something that's on this
Yeah.
form. It's
Thing
hard.
too, it's like they can, but they need like these supports and all of this, and it's like that's not what it's asking.
Yeah.
It's blanket, yes or no, by themselves, independently.
Yeah. And that's the thing when,
It's
at least
hard.
in Idaho, you get a budget based on that. And parents will get a budget of like a low budget and then they'll look at their kid and they'll be like, well, my kid has more things that they need help with than that other kid and that kid got a full budget. And I'm like, well, I'm not saying to lie on the assessment to get more resources. What I'm saying is make sure you're honest and you
Mhm.
will get the resources that your kid needs. Because yeah, parents will look at their kid and be like, well, my kid has more challenges, it seems, than this other kid. Why did they get so much money and my child got less money? I'm like, well, how did you answer the Vineland questions? Because that directly impacts how much money you're going to get in your budget.
I think parents also like, they don't want to make it seem maybe as bad as it is. And so
Yeah.
they do say, oh, they can do that. When reality, not the case.
Yeah. And it's okay if your child can't do something. That's just something to work on. That's why you're getting these resources is so they can get the support they need to be able to do those things. But we're going to get back to deficit-based thinking and neurodiversity affirming thinking. So just some examples. Deficit-based thinking sounds like my child doesn't make enough eye contact, or my child is behind, or my child needs to act more like other kids, or we need to stop stimming, which don't stop their stims. And then they're too rigid, or they don't socialize correctly. And this mindset often leads parents to think about how their child can appear less autistic rather than focusing on their well-being and how they are in the world, how the world is affecting them. And so neurodiversity thinking sounds like, oh, my child communicates differently, where they might not make eye contact the whole time. I don't know where people
Get the eye contact.
get the eye contact, but yeah. The next one is my child regulates their body through movement. Instead of saying, my child doesn't sit still, my child regulates their body through movement. And then my child has sensory needs that deserve respect. So instead of stop stimming, my child has sensory needs that deserve respect. My child's brain learns differently. My child needs accommodations instead of more pressure. So instead of asking, how do I stop this behavior? You begin asking, what is this behavior telling me? Because, as we've said a million times on this podcast, all behavior is communication. So this, like, having the neurodiversity affirming approach is just a switch in your mindset so that you can support your child rather than just making them appear less autistic, which is just masking. And we all know that masking is not where it's at. That just leads to dysregulation and your child having more meltdowns, and nobody wants that.
Yeah.
And then, for example, just another example of neurodiversity affirming approach. If your child covers their ears every time the toilet flushes, a deficit based perspective might say they need to get used to loud noises. So you would do exposure therapy to make them get used to loud noises. A neurodiversity affirming perspective asks, is that sound actually painful or overwhelming for their nervous system? And how can I make the environment more manageable while gradually helping them build tolerance if appropriate? So there's some things that you just can't get away from. Toilets flushing, you're not going to get away from it. So do you need to wear noise canceling headphones when they go, do they need to wear noise canceling headphones when they go into the bathroom? That's a simple accommodation that you can make. I know some people, like, when they go into public bathrooms, they cover up the sensor so that the toilet won't flush, because sometimes you sit down and the toilet flushes and it's too loud. Or, you know
And it's
what?
too early.
And it's too early, yeah. And so then they jump off the toilet because the toilet's flushing and they're freaked out, which rightfully so.
So,
Yeah. And, or just let them plug their ears. It's not that big of a deal. Like, you can flush the toilet with your foot and plug your ears. I've never done that. Just no. I do that all the time because it's loud.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just look at it from a different perspective. Like, and ask yourself, if you think that they need to stop doing something, why? Why do they need to stop doing it? Is it because they look autistic and you don't want them to look autistic? Or is it because something is actually dangerous and they're going to harm themselves if they keep doing that activity? Such as, okay, my kid likes to climb because they like the sensation of climbing. Cool. Is it appropriate for them to go climb up a cliff without safety gear on? Absolutely not. That's something we're going to stop and give accommodations, like teaching them to get safety equipment. So you're not stopping it all the way. You're just providing accommodations, but we're not allowing them to just climb up a cliff. And I've seen it. So we're not allowing them just to climb up a cliff, because if they fall, they're going to hurt themselves. So anyway, and then we're going to do some more examples because I feel like we should. So imagine your child refuses to wear jeans. This is an example from my household because my son refuses to wear jeans, and it really bothers some people. Some people are like, why doesn't your kid wear jeans? Why is he always wearing sweats? That's not appropriate. And I'm like, why isn't it appropriate? Why do you care? So a deficit-based approach might focus on making them tolerate uncomfortable clothing because that's what everyone wears. Doesn't matter what everyone wears. But a neurodiversity affirming approach recognizes that certain fabrics, seams, or waistbands may genuinely feel painful or distracting. Instead of fighting that battle every morning, you ask whether wearing comfortable clothing would help them focus better, feel calmer, and have more energy for learning and socializing. So sometimes the accommodation is the intervention, where we're just swapping out clothes, because I would rather my child be comfortable at school because school is already completely overwhelming. He doesn't need the clothes that he's wearing to also overwhelm him on top of everything else. And then another example is your child flaps their hands when they're excited. A deficit-based mindset sees something that looks different and asks how to stop it. So your child flapping their hands looks autistic. You don't want them to look autistic, so you make them stop. Well, this is going to make their sensory system get completely overwhelmed because the reason they're flapping their hands is to calm themselves. So a neurodiversity affirming mindset recognizes hand flapping as a form of stimming And stimming helps many autistic people regulate emotions, process sensory information, and express excitement. So, unless it's causing harm, there's often no reason to eliminate it. So, the question becomes, is this behavior hurting anyone or is it helping my child regulate? And what is the harm if it's not hurting anyone to let them regulate how they want to regulate? Now, if they're flapping their hands and hitting someone, that's a totally different
Yeah.
story. They're invading someone else's space. They might be hurting somebody else, and so we need to make an accommodation so that they can calm their body down in a way that works for them, but is not harming somebody else. And so a lot of people think that neurodiversity affirming approach is like gentle parenting. You know what they say about gentle parenting? Like it's just lazy parenting and it's not parenting at all.
Yeah,
That-
permissive or
That's
whatever.
permissive parenting, not gentle parenting. But they think the same thing about neurodiversity affirming approaches, that it's just, oh, you're just letting your child do whatever they want because you're letting the autism be free or
Or
whatever.
like coddling them or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, and that's not what this is at all. It doesn't mean that you're pretending autism is always easy or you're just letting them do whatever they want, like, you're still parenting a child.
Mhm.
And then some autistic children have significant communication challenges, dangerous impulsivity, like eloping, running away, running into traffic, any of those things. They might have sleep difficulties. They might have anxiety. A lot of kids I know have gastrointestinal issues, so GI issues, or self injurious behaviors. And these challenges deserve support and intervention. They deserve accommodation. So if your kid is always banging their head against the wall or always banging their head on the ground, obviously we're going to intervene because that can cause harm to your kid.
Yeah.
We're not just going to let them do that because, oh, that's what the autism wants them to do. No, we're going to intervene, but we're not looking at it like, oh, they need to stop that because that's autism and that looks like autism and that's bad. We're not doing that. We're giving them accommodations so they can get what they need in a safe way. Yes. And the difference is the goal. So instead of trying to make a child appear less autistic, the goal is to help them become better communicators, better able to regulate, learn, and build independence, and then participate in life in ways that honor who they are. And I love that because a lot of autistic people hide who they are because they don't think they're going to be accepted because the world has been like, this is the way everyone should be. And then they mask and then they get dysregulated and then they have a meltdown and then they're not happy with their lives. Where I wish that everyone would just unmask and do what they want. And I think the way we see like typical people in quotes, if you're not watching this on video, would change because there's so many people who would just be who they actually are and it wouldn't just be one stereotype. I challenge you to have a mindset shift if your child is just diagnosed and instead of saying, "How can I stop this?" when your child does something you don't understand, try replacing it with, "What need might this behavior be needing?" So, for example, my son would hit his head on the ground whenever his head hurt. I did not know he was having migraines, but he started banging his head on the ground all the time. And I was like, "What are you doing?" And finally, when he could finally communicate what it was, he's like, "Well, it takes my mind off of the pain inside my head if the outside hurts." And I'm like, "What?" So, so he was communicating something with that behavior. And if I would have just been like, "No, stop doing that. We're not going to do that." So we got a medication for headaches and then he stopped banging his head. Or they might be banging their head because they are dysregulated or any number of things. And so if you can be a detective and figure out
Yes.
what that behavior is meeting, then you can get an appropriate behavior in its place. And this simple shift moves you from becoming your child's behavior manager to becoming their detective and teammate and figuring out how to help them thrive in the world. So, we're not lowering expectations, we're just changing the path to success. So instead of, stopping what they're doing and making them mask and all of that, we're just helping them thrive in their community. And so, some other ways that you can support your child and learn about them and not just autism in general is you can follow autistic adults online, and you can read books written by autistic people and listen to autistic voices because their voices are, I would say, the most important to hear because they've been through that experience, and you're not comparing your child to them necessarily, but you're getting a better understanding of what your child might be experiencing based on what they're saying.
Different
So,
perspectives.
yeah, yes. And then the last thing I want to talk about is just some action steps for you to do. You can start a notebook documenting your child's strengths and triggers, sensory preferences, and communication differences, what helps them regulate. So, this is an ABA term, but you can do ABC data where let's say your kid, I don't know, what behavior do kids do? Let's say they're flapping their hands. Okay, what happens before they start flapping their hands every time? And then what happens after? So, is it something that's triggering them? Or is it when they get excited? Or is it when they get angry? Like, you just have to kind of figure out what's going on because kids can flap their hands for a number of different reasons. They can be trying to self regulate, they can just be really happy. So, is it like, does flapping the hands signal that they're just happy and excited, or does it signal that maybe they're under stress? And so, if you notice what they're doing right before, you can help them so that they don't escalate that stress. And then they will be able to just keep maintaining their, regulation. And I think, like, if they're self-injurious behaviors, so, if they're, like, kicking things or they're tearing things off the wall or anything like that, like, that's when you can do the ABC data, and so you notice a behavior that keeps coming up, and then you just notice what they're doing before, and then you notice what they're doing after, and that can help you kind of play detective to help them so they don't escalate into a meltdown because that doesn't feel good for anyone. And then kind of help them gain strategies so that they feel comfortable in their life, basically.
Yeah.
And
And you
then,
can learn to intervene
yeah.
sooner, so you know.
Yeah. So if you see that they're like, let's say they have a meltdown every day and they're ripping things off the wall every day. What's happening? Like, what time of day does it happen? Does it happen when they first wake up? Does it happen after they eat a meal? Does it happen when they get home from school? Yeah, you just have to figure out when it's happening. And then you might figure out, okay, is there anyone in the room when this happens? Have they been given on demand when this happens? Have they not eaten in a while when this happens? Did they sleep not so great the night before?
Yeah.
There's all these different things that could be affecting what is going on. And so that's why it's hard. But if you like keep a notebook of it, then you'll be better able to understand what's going on. And then if you do need help understanding your child's behavior, or, you're just like, my child is doing this all the time and I don't know why they're escalating. I don't know what's going on. Then you can talk to us. You can email us. You can join the neurodivergent parenting community. You can talk to an occupational therapist. You can talk to a behavioral therapist. You can talk to their teachers. You can talk to a speech therapist. Like any of those things, you can do that. So that's what I challenge you to do. If you want to join the neurodivergent parenting community, you can just go to everybrainisdifferent.com, or you can also just send us a message from that website if you need help with anything. So please let us know. And then next week, we're going to be talking about the second thing that I recommend, and that is to apply for every resource available that you need, that you think you need.
That you
Just
might
apply
need?
for resources that you might need, even if you think you might need it. Waitlists are so long.
It's insane.
We're going to talk about that next week. But for now, my child.
Learn about your child.
Yes, learn about your child. And I am learning that my child needs my attention right now. So I'm going to hope y'all have a good week.